Welcome to Church at Home. Father Ed Estok here,
Father Joshua Trefney.
and we're coming to you from the chapel at the Priest's House at St. Albert the Great. Special welcome to those who might not be members of our parish, but are members of our online family of faith. And we have gathered to consider the scriptures for the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And they are not unfamiliar to any of us. And we are considering our memory, if you want to say. In everybody's life, dementia or Alzheimer's is a tragedy. But in some lives, I had a funeral not too long ago, and it was a brilliant mind and a creative mind. And it was really such a tragedy for the family to watch all that brilliance and creativity fade away. And so this idea of memory,
Memory is so important. I often preach about memories during funeral masses myself, because we're sharing these memories of people. But our church, our faith really is one of remembrance.
Mass, of course.
Yeah, Mass is self. We have there's a Greek word. Our favorite is giving you fun Greek words to remember. So this one is anamnesis, and it means to remember. And then there's the Hebrew word where we get anamnesis, or from the Hebrew people we get zakar, which means to remember, and then when it's translated into Greek we get anamnesis. And this process in Mass is a process of memory bringing about a reality. When we remember the things that Jesus did, we actually make Jesus present to us. That's what happens in the Eucharist. There's kind of a collision of heaven and earth where time and timelessness, the finite and the infinite, collide, and so it kind of folds in on itself until Jesus becomes present. That's anamnesis. But what is really cool is that this history of the Hebrew people, this zakar, to remember, we get it. It starts all the way back in Genesis, really. God starts telling them, don't forget the things that I've done for you. Don't forget. And all they do over and over again is forget. Yeah. And then we have this great reading from Exodus today where God tells them, again, don't forget that you were once, in exile. Don't forget that you were once widows and orphans. Don't forget that you were once slaves in the land of Egypt. And so don't forget these, and don't forget the bad, but also don't forget the victory of overcoming those troubles. And don't forget the good things that I've done for you. Don't forget all of the triumphs that the Lord has done in your life. And
what would be the symptom among the Hebrew people in the book of Exodus? What is the symptom that they have forgotten?
Yeah, they start doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
Mistreating other people who are aliens and widows and the poor. And so by their choices, by their love or lack of love, they are betraying the fact that they have forgotten.
So our actions show that we have forgotten where we've come from.
Our emotions also can, and our souls, so our spiritual lives. It's an interesting thing in some psychology and in neuroscience that really we only remember things that we are not finished with. So, I don't know, like you, I'll get my mind onto some thought or while driving, and I get all the way home and not really remember the drive.
Right, but you can't forget that thing that's been going through your head. Yeah.
Right, so that so this idea that if you are having a nagging memory, particularly a painful or hurtful memory, it could be the indication to you that there is something in there for you that you haven't processed and absorbed and healed and reconciled. So So this memory is a great thing. And Father was telling me about St. Ignatius's spiritual exercises in how our memory could be helpful to us. So
Yeah, so when we, St. Ignatius tells us that when we're in times of struggle and strife, or what he calls desolation, which is a time where it's difficult to see the Lord, where we're not feeling his love in a particular way, or where we're not able to express it all the time. When we're in those times, those negative times, it is the bad spirit, or the evil spirit, he wants us to forget all of the good things and to dwell in the darkness, to let the desolation be all that we remember. So during those times, Ignatius tells us that what we're supposed to do is to recall the memory of our consolation, or those times where we did feel the Lord, those times where we remember the good things. It's exactly what we hear in our first reading today, that when we are in times of struggle and pain, our job in the spiritual life is to make sure that we don't forget all of the good things God has done for us, because we've received forgiveness and reconciliation. We've received the Eucharist. We've received baptism. We've continued to celebrate and to have joy and to have moments where we feel God's love for us and his compassion. And so to allow ourselves to forget those things is to allow ourselves to forget who we are, as children of God. And just like the Hebrews, when we forget who we are as children of God, we often forget that other people are children of God as well.
That's right.
And so then we start treating them with the same negativity that we can sometimes treat ourselves with.
Right. And St. Ignatius was a master of this, because he realized that in the imagination, by recalling, let's say, the lives of the saints, we can make their strength, their courage, their faith actually present to us. And it can convert us. It can change our hearts. So this idea of memory, forgetting, and remembering is essential to not only our life in the world, but our life of faith, and especially in our spiritual lives. Yeah. And so that brings us to Jesus's approach to how we can, as the children of God, successfully maneuver through what is obviously a challenging life at times. And so he is asked, well, what is the greatest commandment? And so we were talking a little bit about, well, what are commandments?
Yeah.
And, well, we might say it's the law, it's the rules. And so sometimes we have an aversion to commandments, laws, and rules. But what we're after now...
Yeah, because it kind of feels, like when we use that language, we feel like something is being imposed on us.
Right,
restricting us. Right. Yeah.
And so this notion of remembering... so Jesus says, well, this is the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. So that is not one of the 10 commandments, by the way. So it is a new commandment, and it is what we're calling this. Well, it's the law of love. So love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So it's the law of love, and there's kind of an irony here. It's
because we call it a law,
right?
But it's really not a law.
It's not a law. It's a freedom.
Yeah.
It's an invitation. Let's put it that way. And what we're thinking is that what this law of love, the commandment, the greatest commandment, the great commandment, is a certain type of remembering. Remember who you are as the child of God, and remember that your neighbor is yourself.
Yeah. And remember that the person who gave all of this to you was God.
Right.
And so if we can remember those three things, then all of our love should flow freely into the world.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's less of a law and more of a key.
Yeah.
Like a key would open a door, so it can liberate us from the prison of despair and desolation in the spiritual life, in conflict and resentment in our social lives, and it can liberate us from the ignorance and the oppression that we sometimes can bring into other people's lives if we forget who they are, and we forget who we are, and we forget who God is.
Yeah. And so this brings us back to what we said at the beginning when we're talking about anamnesis, because remembering who we are, remembering who our neighbor is, makes God present in our life, right? Because when we remember that we are children of God and we gather in his name, right? Jesus is present among us. When we remember who we are and we act with kindness and love towards our neighbors, the widow, the orphan, the outcast, the forsaken, the forgotten, when we reach out to them in love and we remember who they are, we are serving Jesus. Jesus is made present. It's another form of the same kind of thing that happens at Mass, where we're making Jesus present. We're allowing, I guess maybe it's not a making, it's a revealing of what is true. So it is, we're revealing Jesus's presence in the world.
We are actually making ourselves present to what is real.
Right, yeah.
So we could begin to see love as not only a new law, but love is a particular way of remembering.
Yeah.
And what we also know about love and loving is it is in fact making God present. Because, of course, first letter of John tells us, because God is in fact love. So we have the power to make God present.
Yeah.
By remembering in the form of love.
Yeah. So maybe there's someone in your life, maybe there's someone that you struggle with, maybe you're in your own time of desolation, of struggle and darkness, and we just ask that this week you try to remember the good things that God has done for you and the good things that he is still doing for you, and to bring that remembrance into reality through love.
Right.
So thank you for joining us, and God bless you all.
Yeah. Take care.